Everybody, this is Mike Pemple, your moderator for today. Welcome to our SAME resilience webinar, where we're going to be talking today about cybersecurity design requirements for a facility-related control system. Next slide, please, Tumel. Thank you. This is our agenda for today. I appreciate everybody joining us. I know it looks like we still have a few people jumping on. Have quite a crew today, quite a few people. So I appreciate if everybody stays on mute as we go through. It'll really help us manage the presentation. We are going to be, as I mentioned, most of our time is going to be devoted to the presentation today. Following presentation, we will have a Q&A, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. Just a second here, followed by a quick update on our SAME resilience community of interest, and then some closing remarks. Next slide. So before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping things. Please mute your phones, but keep yourself on mute on the WebEx, if you would, please. That will help our speaker quite a bit. If you do have questions at any time throughout the presentation, there is a chat mode on WebEx, and it is in the upper right. See, I already have a chat. Okay, that's David. Yeah, looking forward to see your questions in the chat. Everybody should have a chat mode in the upper right. Please enter your questions in the chat, and we will read them off. I think it's just going to be a lot easier with the number of people that we have for folks to go ahead and put their questions right in chat mode. During the presentations, you will be in listening mode only. I suppose if you are on a phone and for some reason don't have access to chat and have a question, we can deal with that. Just take yourself off mute and ask the question. However, we do prefer you use the chat section. We offer PDHs, a credit that will be sent out after the presentation. The PDHs are going to be sent to everybody who registered for the seminar, only registered for the seminar. If you are listening and did not register but would like a PDH, I encourage you to register. That way you will get a copy of the PDH. If you're unable, please go ahead and send a quick email to Belle, and she will ensure that you get your PDH. The webinar is being recorded, and it will be posted on the SAME website. Next. So I'm really excited today to have Mr. David Gary with us. I'm going to talk just briefly about the problem set, and then turn it over to David. Most of you, I think, I'm probably speaking to the choir for the people that are on this call, that understand the threat of cybersecurity to the cyber threat to our infrastructure. We're dealing in an era where we have near-peer adversaries and terrorist organizations that are attacking our infrastructure really on a daily and really on an hourly basis. It's no longer just just phishing attacks and email and people looking for financial information. There is an increasing understanding, and I think we understand the problem that our critical infrastructure, the infrastructure that supports our military facilities and really our American way of life, that infrastructure is under attack as well. It's an ongoing challenge. When you start talking about, especially many of our older buildings and facilities, and some of the utility control systems that are digital control systems that were designed before really the age of cyber, before we really fully understood the threat to cyber. Many of this infrastructure is critical to not only for instance the power grid, but certainly critical to military operations, and critical to our ability to project power overseas, and critical to our combatant commanders. Imagine a world in which a cyber attack takes down a critical node, for instance, in a power grid, then which has cascading effects that impacts a military facility, and then maybe reduces its ability to either see a threat or to respond to a threat, perhaps overseas, a kinetic threat. and maybe that threat is massive terrorist operation. And so it maybe buys time for an adversary, confuses the tactical situation, and before you know it, we're in a place where our tactical ability ability to influence the situation is then reduced. This is what military commanders really face today, and we know it happens, and we've seen it happen before. It's not really science fiction. We're in a situation, we're in a place today where we have to understand that it's time to stop, as a colleague of mine said, admiring the problem. And I think the AEC community in particular can really impact solutions to this problem. And this is why we're so happy and so pleased to have Mr. David Gary here today to kind of talk to us about how the AEC community can help with kind of implementing solutions to help protect our most critical facilities. A little bit about David. David works for NAVFAC Atlantic, currently assigned to capital improvements business line. He is the energy and cybersecurity criteria manager. And more importantly, or as importantly, he works on and is actually currently the chair of the Utilities Control Working Group, which is a working group that includes all of the services and the folks that are interested in helping protect or implement cybersecurity solutions to our facilities. David is formerly worked for the Army Corps of Engineers at Norfolk District. He has a degree in engineering from Tidewater Community College and also a BS in electrical engineering from Old Dominion University. He is a professional engineer in the state of Virginia, LEED accredited. I served in the Navy for 5 years active duty as a nuke and a submariner, and currently resides in Virginia Beach. So without further ado, Mr. David Gary.
Yeah, thank you, Mike, and greetings, everyone. I appreciate you taking the call today. We'll go to the next slide there. So I would say that at the little cartoon there on the graphic, not too long ago we were in the lower left, but I think we could agree that we are clearly in the lower right today of the graphic. It's a cute representation of things over the years. I like how before the other three is they're facing each other, but now it's they're turned away, right? So it's that we're not facing our adversaries head on. Okay, next slide, please. So here's the agenda slide, right? And in good military fashion, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell it to you, and then at the end, I'm going to tell you that I told it to you, right? Okay, so today here we're briefly going to cover this risk management framework, RMF, and how it relates and how the DoD, what that means to the Department of Defense. We're going to define a couple of terms: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. We're going to discuss information technology versus operational technology, IT versus OT. I'm going to provide an overview introduction of the UFC Forward 010-06. It's titled Cybersecurity for Facility-Related Control Systems and how to follow it, right? In the back, there are backup slides, which we won't necessarily get into unless a question leads us that way, but it has more detailed definitions and a typical control system network architecture, along with policy documents that I'm not going to specifically reference either, but the policy documents are all back there in the backup slides too, for your reference after the presentation. I also have 2 secrets to share with you. So as we go through this, I've got 2 secrets. All right, so pick a note of those. So without further ado, let's get into it. Next slide, please. Okay, so the risk, or excuse me, the R in risk management framework is risk, right? So this is a simple risk slide, which probably isn't very exciting to today's participants, right? But what I do want you to focus on in this is the finger, right? The finger is the control, the thing that you do to mitigate risk, right? The selection, implementation, and validation of the things you do, the fingers that you apply for cybersecurity is really at the basis of what RMF is, right? So the finger is the control. That's what's at the basis of the next 15 to 20 slides here. Next slide, please. Okay, so here's the RMF. So the Department of Defense manages cybersecurity risk utilizing this thing called the RMF process, this risk management framework process. The RMF process is comprised of 6 steps, and thinking logically, that, at least to me, they kind of make sense, right? The first step in RMF is categorization. This is a step where you figure out what you have by considering the importance of the control system, the information it contains and passes, the mission it serves. You know, this step is typically completed before design starts, if possible, right? Categorization of what you have. Step 2 is selection of controls, right? Once you know what your control system is and the mission it serves, then you select the controls, you know, you select the fingers that you will put in your design. They're the discrete things that you're going to do that you will use to protect the control system and enable mission continuity. So most of RMF step 2 occurs during design, where you're selecting those controls. Step 3 is the implement, the do it, right? You selected them in step 2, and 3 is you do it, right? You build it. Most of step 3 occurs in construction, right? Where we're actually building what we selected in our design. So 3 is build it or do it. Step 4 is you assess the controls, or in other words, validate what you did. It's going to sound a whole lot like commissioning, which is not foreign to anyone on the phone either, right? So here's where the government will come in. They'll check the controls that were selected, and then they'll check that we actually implemented them, right? Okay. Once that validation has occurred, step 5 is authorize the system. You know, this is yay. This is where the authorizing official signs this magical document called the ATO, the authority to operate, right? It's kind of like what might be perceived as the end state, but unfortunately it's not. It just gives you the authority to connect that system and operate, and that system is at a level of security that's acceptable to the authorizing official, okay? Once you have that ATO, the control system goes into step 6, which is continuous monitoring. After the ATO, it goes into a maintenance phase where every 2 years, each control that you selected is reevaluated for applicability. This is also the phase where weekly audits or automated scans are performed on the system, with those results uploaded to DISA, the Defense Information System Agency. And you have to do those scans to maintain the ATO. So unlike LEAD, where you get a plaque on the wall and you might have things to do for the next year or so, you can't walk away from an ATO or it'll get turned off, right? So that's the continuous monitoring phase of an ATO. So to recap these systems, you first determine what you have. You then select the controls to protect it. You actually implement them. You validate that you did what you said you were going to do. That's 4. You get a signature in 5, and you perform ATO maintenance in 6. All right, next slide, please. So moving on to confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Often referred to CIA, and unfortunately, it's not the Central Information or Central Intelligence Agency. The C here is confidentiality. All right, and what that means is your data confidential? Is it yours and yours alone, right? Are you sure no one else got the email you sent, or is your credit card number secure, right? Is it confidential, okay? Integrity is the I. Do you believe the data you're seeing, right? That control system says that the space temperature is 72 degrees. Do you believe it's really 72 degrees? What if it said 92, right? Would you believe that, right? So does the data have integrity? And then the last one is the A, is the availability. And this is simply, is the control system even operational, right? Is it up and running and available, right? When I open up the DVC system, is it even going to turn on? So those are the CI ratings, the confidentiality, integrity, and availability. they will each be rated, they'll each be given what's called an impact rating of low, moderate, and high. So it isn't always, if you have a low for a C, doesn't mean low for an A. And if you have a high for an A, it doesn't mean you have to have a high for a C. They can be individually rated as low, moderate, and high. So what you'll hear things like, hey, my control system is low, low, low. And that's the mean low confidentiality, low integrity, low availability. Likewise, if you say I'm low, low, moderate, well, since moderate's third, it's saying I got low confidentiality, low integrity, and moderate availability, right? Again, but generally speaking, and this is not knowing anything about mission or anything at all, but generally speaking, low impact ratings are for mission support. Moderate ratings are for mission essential, and high is for mission critical. So where that line between mission essential and mission critical is kind of fuzzy. I think we all kind of know the difference between low and moderate, or support and essential, but that's kind of if you know nothing else, that's to try to relate what does low and moderate, high mean. It's kind of like that. Think mission and support as low, mission essential as moderate, and mission critical as high. Another thing I like to do, not knowing anything about a particular control system, but if your control system's on backup power because of other mission requirements, not for cyber, but for other mission requirements, your control system's on backup power, it's probably has an availability of moderate. Like a fire alarm system's on a backup power. I would imagine most fire alarm systems are probably going to have an availability of moderate. Not saying all, and not saying none of them will be high, but again, not knowing anything else. And then also relating to what would be high, if there are dual sources of power, or you have a control system that has a normal, alternate, and emergency source, availability is probably high on that control system because you're doing other mission things that probably lead to you're probably high, right? So, and again, I just try to give those as examples of rules of thumb, and they're not set in stone, but they're just talking points to, okay, what does high or moderate mean compared to others? And those are just some examples that I use. Okay, next slide. And here we're going to dive a little deeper into these definitions here too. Okay, so IT versus OT, right? So information technology, that seems like business systems, right? That's like computer, email, SIPRNet, right, type of stuff, right? OT is your operational systems, your facility-related control systems like DDC or fire alarm, okay? Cyber's been around for a long time for IT systems, and until recently, almost ignored for OT, right? That's changing, but we're really good at making a banking system secure, right? We can bank on our phones, right? But applying that same methodology in an OT system might actually break it, right? You might put so many controls on your OT system that it doesn't become available anymore. It doesn't work. And if you put all those controls on your control system and it breaks it, what's the point of having the control system? And so that's getting into the risk management side of this, is that I might need to not do as much things to keep my system running, and I'm going to assume that risk of operating that control system. And so that's really at the root of all this. So now I'm going to blend our CIA ratings with IT and OT. Okay, so I got two examples that I like to do. And the first example is email. So with email, if you send an email, and let's think confidentiality, do you want only the person you send that email to get that email? Well, absolutely. If you get an email, do you want to believe it hasn't been touched or manipulated? Again, absolutely. If that email takes 2 seconds, 2 minutes, or 20 minutes to get to you, is it the end of the world? Probably not. So availability might not be as important on email as it would for maybe a facility-related control system. And so now we'll go to a facility-related control system, and the example I'll use is fire alarm. And I'll go through those same ratings again. So think fire alarm system and confidentiality. If I have a fire in my building and an adversary knows I have a fire, is that the end of the world? I don't want them to know, but it's more important that my fire department knows. So if they know, so be it. Integrity. If I have a fire in a building, do I want to believe it's really a fire and not a false alarm? Well, absolutely, right? And availability for fire alarm system, right? If I pull a pole station and it takes 2 seconds, 2 minutes, or 20 minutes for that signal to get to the fire department, does that matter? Well, absolutely, right? So generally speaking, all things being equal, IT systems typically have a higher confidentiality rating than availability. But the opposite is true for OT, typically, right? I'm usually, if somebody's hacking my meter data for my AMI meters, yeah, I don't want them to know what my meter data is, but I want to have that data available, or it's no good to me. I can't act on that data. So typically for OT systems, availability will be higher than confidentiality. Again, not in all cases, but again, just a generalization. All right. So now we have the foundation to talk RMF. All right. So the next slide, please. And I'm going to apologize for the text here. Here we go. Sorry. Each control system has an assigned system owner and information system security manager. System owner is an individual with a day-to-day mission owner responsibility of the system, kind of like your public works type of person. The ISSM is the individual responsible for the day-to-day cybersecurity of that system. That's like your IT, your command information office. Okay, those two people are responsible for coordinating with the authorizing official, or AO, who categorize the system. Right, they know the mission and they know the risk tolerance of the AO, so they can properly categorize that system as a low, moderate, high, given the mission of the control system. The AO, who happens to be a general officer at SES, and it really is that high, and they really do sign these things. They are the ones who are ultimately responsible for the operational risk of the control system, and the only ones who can sign an ATO. It really goes that high. In Navy, it's for NAVFAC, excuse me, it's Admiral Cork. The ISM has a bunch of folks working with them to follow the RMF process, steps 2 and 3. Once the ISSM confirms that the controls are met in steps 2, and you actually constructed it in 3, this is where the step 4 of RMF, this validation, comes into play. That person's called the security control assessor / validator, often normally just called just the validator. Next slide. That validator will come in, and that's validate that you did what you said you were going to do. They generate a report called the risk assessment report. They send that report to the authorizing official with a recommendation to authorize it or not. The AO will then take that report, probably follow the recommendation because it's been vetted through a number of folks before it gets to them, but they'll make the decision whether or not to authorize it. And when they do, they sign off and you get an ATO, the authority to operate. The AO, again, is the only one who can accept risk of operating the system, right? And like I mentioned before, once you get your ATO, the control system transfers into a continuously monitoring phase, and that's step 6. So I apologize for all of that text, and normally this is a point where I will pause for comments. So I'm going to say, hey, please take a moment and put your questions down in the chat. They are truly enlightening. They do impact our criteria, and they're certainly important to me to hear them and go over them. And so while you jot your questions down, here's a quick recap, right? So we discussed the RMF 6-step process, right? To categorize it, to select it, to implement it, to check it, to sign it off, and to maintain it. We talked about the CIA ratings. We talked about OT and IT, right? So now we can get into the meat of it. Next slide, please. So here's introducing UFC 4010-06, cybersecurity for facility-related control systems. And I guess as the presentation's catching up, I'm not sure if it has caught up to me yet. Hopefully we're on slide 13. There we go. It's been out for a couple of years. It's one of the core 26 UFCs and applies to all new and repair projects. So it's been around for a while. The transition's over. It more than likely applies, right? So with respect to RMF, the UFC only covers only covers criteria that applies to the DOR and not everything necessary for the RMF process or not everything necessary for an ATO. Right? The UFC is criteria focused to designers of record, right? So it has a narrow focus. So following the UFC won't mean you're going to get an ATO. It's meaning you'll have the things done that you need to do from a designer from record perspective, right? It also only covers low and moderate impact CIA rated systems. High impact control systems require specialized consideration and are beyond what we could get into the UFC and make it something that was worthwhile. Okay, next slide, please. So designer responsibilities, like nothing really new here. What do you got to do? Well, okay, we got to follow the UFC. Okay, we know that. There's a guide spec out there, sports and criteria. Great. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes. But it basically means what? Okay, we're going to include cyber and design. That's these things, these CCIs, the controls, the discrete things that you do to protect your system. You're going to coordinate what you select from CCIs with the system owner and the ISSM, right? The Information Security Manager. Each FEC in the Navy has an ISSM. They know the mission. They know the operation of the control systems. They have to operate it, and they have to keep it cyber secure after we finish. Another thing that the UFC talks about doing is providing RMF documentation. In RMF Word, they have these things called artifacts. To you and I, artifacts are construction submittals, right? It's just documentation. But in RMF Words, they have these things called artifacts. Artifacts is just documentation. And you'll also see in RMF language that there's something called the Information System Security Engineer. Well, with engineer in that, there's ISSE, and that's the DOR. So you have a role in RMF, and your role is ISSE as designer, right? And again, the design analysis becomes one of the first artifacts, one of the first submittals in an authorization. Okay, next slide, please. The designers can't do slide. Then we'll get to what you can do. What can't you do? Well, you can't define the level of risk for the system, right? That no mission owner should ask the designer of record, how important is my mission? That shouldn't happen, right? As we said before, the designer of record does not assume operational risk. Only the authorizing official can do that. So since the only authorizing official to do that, the designer of record can't give you an ATO. Right? I can't put a plaque on the building, say this building has an ATO. That is not within your purview. You obviously support the authorization and provide artifacts that feed into getting an ATO, but you can't, no one can ask you, hey, designer of record, when you're done with your design, I want a submittal of an ATO signed before we go to construction contract award. You know, that just can't happen. Okay. So now we're gonna get into it. So next slide, please, slide 16. So I'm a designer, right? How do I apply cybersecurity to my project, right? So here are the steps in the UFC. And here we go, it's a little different. The cybersecurity for facility-related UFC is a little different from others. It doesn't have a list of must-dos, right? It doesn't say do this, do this, do this, follow this, and you're good. Instead, it outlines a process, and the process is there on slide 16. A process which, after you follow, the requirements will rise to the top. Those requirements which will then get put into the design. Now, my apologies up front. The word steps you see on slide 16 and the word steps you see in the UFC are not the same as RMF. And believe me, as owner of this document, that's going to change with change 3. And I'm just going to not use those steps 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. They're going to be something else. So it doesn't, I'm going to divorce the word step. But here's your steps. So now we're going to look at each step a little bit closer. So the first step in the UFC is determine the impact rating of the control system. This sounds like, and it is actually exactly like RMS step 1 categorization, right? What do you have? Categorization. Now, step 2 is to use the impact ratings to generate a security control list from this 882. And now we're getting into some unfamiliarity of new terms, right? what is this NIST, and what are these, what's the security control list. Third, we're going to use that security control list that we are going to get, I guess, and master CCI lists to develop a baseline CCI for the control systems. Now we're going to get some new words here, right? Well, CCIs, another word, they're control correlation identifiers. They're, again, the fingers that you're going to do in the risk example, right? They are serialized into a common DoD listing. Every control, every NIST control has a specific CCI number, and that number is consistent throughout the Department of Defense. Okay. We will then tailor that baseline list to develop the particular controls which will be incorporated into your design. So it's okay that not every CCI will apply to every aspect of every control system. If that was the case, the UFC would simply say, go do all this stuff and do great things. The RMF is about a process of mitigating risk. So for example, if there is a CCI that talks about putting CAC readers on human interfaces, right? Well, putting a CAC reader makes sense for a laptop or maybe a DDC front end, but you would not put a CAC reader on a fire alarm pole station, right? On a fire alarm pole station, you would simply tailor out that particular CCI, making it not applicable, document why, and move on. And it's this consideration and documentation of each CCI by control system that's the process that UFC covers, right? So you're downloading this list, you're looking at that list, thinking that list multiple times for every single control system in your job. So it's okay if the CCIs are different for different control systems. It's expected. And it's okay that some of those things you're not going to do. Again, these are operational technology things. It's okay. RMF is about documenting that risk. And if you're not going to do a certain CCI, it's okay. Document why, and hopefully that the AO will still sign off on it. And that's why having the ISSM participate, who knows the risk tolerance of the AO, can help. Yeah, you maybe should or shouldn't tailor that particular thing out, right? And so as we're working with them, can help you be successful. So once you determine all the things that you got to do, step 4 is identify who has to do it, right? Not all CCIs are the responsibility of the DOR or construction contractor. And for a low system, not to scare folks, there's about 900 CCIs that you need to consider for a low system. Now, the good news is, of that 900, only about 145 are going to end up being DOR or construction contractor responsibility. The rest are by others, and that's why following the UFC and constructing those 145 CCIs is not the whole effort in obtaining an ATO, right? That UFC is only handling 145 of the 900 CCIs that are more than likely necessary to achieve an ATO. And so that's why we in the design and construction community, we're just augmenting a greater RMF effort that's beyond our control. Okay, and then step 5 is put the results of the tailoring list in the you tailored each list, put all those list of tailoring and which ones you included or not in your design analysis. And now the design analysis just became one of the first submittals of the RMF process. It's documenting of RMF step 2, the selection of controls, right? Your design analysis documents why you did or didn't tailor, why you didn't put in particular CCIs and which ones are in your contract. That's RMF step 2, and the design analysis is a key submittal in being successful at step 2. Step 5 is do it. Well, I guess step 4, decide what, that's what I talked about step 4. Step 5 is do it, right? Any CCI that was deemed DOR, construction contractor responsible, put it in the plans and specs, right? And here's another thing. It's not that scary because many of those 145 things, they're not new. They're things we're already doing. We're just now documenting that we're doing them for cybersecurity. Those 145 things include things like changing the default password, putting a lock on the mechanical room door that has the controller for the GDC system. You know, they're construction things that we're doing a great number of that 145 already. So it's not 145 new things that we haven't done before. What's new is that we're documenting that we're doing these 145 or ish things. That's not a hard and fast number, it's a rough number. But we're doing this 145 ish things for cyber, and we're documenting it. So here comes the first secret, first of two. Guess what? The UFC in Appendix H has already downloaded the entire list from NIST. I've already done step 2. I've already assigned the CCIs to a DoD serialized number. Already been done. And control system agnostic, not knowing your particular control system, but thinking control systems in general, that list has already been pre-tailored to list. And it already includes a guess as to who's going to be responsible for that CCI. So the UFC has basically done steps 2, 3, and 4 for you, control system agnostic. And step 1 is given to you by somebody else. You know, so these steps aren't so scary. Now, again, it's a control system agnostic view, and there needs to be some rigor to be sure that those controls apply to your control system. Again, to use that same example before, is we're not going to put a CAC reader on a fire alarm pole station. Right? Okay. And so the do it part, again, is update your design drawings and edit the guide specs accordingly. And that's exactly what we do, you know, every day. Next slide, please. So here's a graphical representation that kind of shows the timeline relationship between the RMF 6-step process and how it falls in relationship to design, bid, build. Notice that finishing the UFC steps doesn't even finish step 2. It almost finishes step 2, but not quite, right? And not shown here, that maybe I could add to it, is if you were to do the guide spec and add it in here, that's the do it part, you could get the end of step 3. But again, that's only covering 145 of the 900 things necessary for a low system. So it's still not everything you would need for step 3, just what's DOR responsible for. And then again, just for reference there, I know I don't need to explain, you know, design, build, and design, bid, build methodologies, but that's just kind of where the RMF falls and what you're doing, what steps. Again, of note here, note in design, bid, build that RMF step 2 bridges from design to building. That is because you can't finish step 2, which is the selection of controls. You can't totally finish step 2 unless you know the make, model, and firmware of equipment in the job. So that is why you can almost finish step 2 in design. You can select that you're going to have a controller, but because of the department's or the government's open procurement, we can't specify make and model on our plans and specs. So until we can't really finish step 2 in design, and that's why, is because to truly finish step 2 and to really assess every control, you have to know not just the make and model, but the current version of firmware that that manufacturer has provided. And if you're going to maintain an ATO, you better be in business maintaining that software, because the minute he doesn't, you could lose your authorization later in life. That gets into the own and maintenance side of things. Okay, so next slide, please. Oh, wait. Next slide. I guess is it catching up? There we go. So here's the guide spec. Not much to say here per se, except it supports the UFC, and it includes the requirements for construction contractors to provide artifacts or construction submittals, which support the RMF process as a whole. You know, these artifacts that it asks for are things like, hey, construction contractor, give me the network diagram of your control system. Give me your hardware and software list to include firmware and version of the software. Give me your passwords, because you've changed them from the defaults, right? Wink, wink. Of course you have. So that's the kind of things that this guide spec talks about. Next slide there, slide 20. Unfortunately, the guide spec right now only covers low impact systems. That's the version dated late in 17. There is an update underway to address moderate, and it does have tailoring options to include DDC and electronic security. So the tailoring options still need to be double checked, but it's an even better guess than the control system agnostic guess, in that it was those CCIs were further tailored considering a typical DDC and a typical electronic security system. There's efforts underway to include tailoring options for fire alarm and lighting and fuel right now as well. So more tailoring options are coming. Next slide. Okay, so remember that the first secret, the pre-downloaded and initial control system agnostic pre-tailored list in Appendix H that had assigned responsibilities? Here's the second secret. Every control system agnostic CCI that's on that list is already built into the guide spec. And not only is it built into the guide spec, it's built into the guide spec with the particular CCI serialized number in there too. So as you see there on the slide, you see which controls and which CCIs that statement addresses. They're surrounded by curly braces. We had to fight the guide spec folks to get this put in here, but these are important, and please don't delete them, because our validators, right, the government that's going to come into effect and make sure we do what we said we were going to do, they use these CCIs to help validate what we said we were going to do and how it was addressed. So again, please don't delete those CCIs unless you're deleting that whole paragraph because those CCIs don't apply. But that's why they're there. Okay. Also in the guide spec, it has a paragraph that says, for blank control systems, do the following, right? So what you'll do as a designer, because it has all those CCIs built into it, control system agnostic. So as a designer, you'll copy and paste that blank control system paragraph into itself, right, as a new paragraph in that spec. Change the word blank to elevator, or change the word blank to lighting control, or change the word to whatever your control system is, and then tailor that list to that particular control system. Do that for each control system in your job, and you're done. Right? That's kind of the thing, right? A lot of the way, it's not a blank sheet of paper with cyber, with this UFC and Appendix H, and the way that the guide spec has been built out. I unfortunately can't take credit for all that great work. It happened just before I got in the seat here, but I'm certainly going to maintain it, because it is a lot of great work that saves designers of records for having to do repetitive tasks over again, and pre-tailors things down, control system agnostic, that probably don't apply to any project. Some of the things they pre-tailored out are things like, hey, for any publicly available control system information, blah, 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 blah. Well, none of our information is publicly available. So the CCIs that apply to that have already been tailored out. We'll go on the next slide. And this is the agenda wrap-up slide, right? So this is where hey, have I told you what I said I was going to tell you? And I think we talked about these things. Again, there's the backup slides. I want to thank you for your attention, and I'll say next slide one more time and pass it back to Mike. Thank you.
Hey, David. Yeah, great presentation. Thanks so much for joining us today. Now, I see that there are some questions and/or comments coming into the chat bar, which is fantastic. We'll go through those in a minute. I give you all time to think about additional questions, and please type them in, and I'll give those of you on the phone that don't have the ability to chat an opportunity to unmute and ask a question as well. But let me start with this, David, and this is, I'm going to ask you your opinion, and it may, with the understanding that you don't necessarily have influence over this, but I'm interested to hear your opinion on this. You commented a couple times about our guide specs and UFCs being agnostic as to the specification of the control systems, the make, not specs, but the make and model. Would it be beneficial for DoD, Navy, or or not just DoD, or maybe just the individual components to be more prescriptive in that manner? Would it make cybersecurity of utility control systems easier if we have, for instance, common or one type of control system across our organization?
Yeah, so I'll address from the Navy point of view, because that is something that we are tackling right now. So these authorizations, they take a long time. They're laborious and intensive, lots of paperwork, looking at lots of different things. And when we have hundreds of thousands of control systems within our purview, getting authorizations on all of those is a monumental task. And then we're building new ones along the way, right? So each one that comes in, do I really want to go through this authorization process every time I build a new building, right? So how can we get around that? So the Navy is actually pursuing what's called a single FRCS by base, by control system type. We are looking at, we're following regular FAR rules. We're doing business case analyses to produce J&As, such that if it makes sense on a particular base to go with vendor A and equipment B, then we'll write a J&A that does that. And then I get that system authorized once, and then I can then simply specify that make and model. And then my validation is, did I buy that make and model? And then all you're doing is called an MFR, a memo for the record. All you're doing is adding to an existing authorization, not doing your own standalone. So there's an effort that we'll have J&As in place at our installations following regular FAR rules to help streamline this ATO process. It's also the maintenance side of it too, right? I've only got so many folks that can maintain these authorizations. And so if I'm only maintaining a fewer number of authorizations, I can better do that. I can't maintain thousands of authorizations. So again, if I can reduce the number of authorizations I'm maintaining, that's what's behind that. So you might see some of that come future with a J&A by installation type. I can't speak for the Army and the Air Force, but and I can't say it's going to happen. It's regular FAR rules, but that's an initiative that we're trying to do. Over.
Yeah, no, I understand. Thanks, and appreciate great answer. Okay, so let me go through a couple of the questions. We had the first one here. I'll just a little bit of a kind of open-ended, but certainly interested to hear your opinion. How kind of overall, and the question is, how can the industry help government solve a problem? I guess we're talking about really the AEC industry right now. And so what is the one thing, let's just say one thing.
Yeah, the first is, and it's going to sound silly, familiarity with the US from an A&E perspective. Familiarity with the USC. It reads weird. It's got new terms that designers of records aren't typically used to reading. It's a blend of IT and designers. And so, really dive into that UFC, really dive into those appendices, because a lot of work has been done there to help you out from a design perspective. Now, what else could they do is, as I've referenced here, is that these authorizations are more than just what the typical designer of record responsible for, right? There's a total of 900, we've only covered 145-ish in the UFC. Well, designers of records could get smart on the other 700 things and maybe start providing authorization services. Maybe that's something. That is a credential that just doesn't, it's not out there, right? We have smart designers and we have smart IT people and we have smart folks that know control systems. We don't have a lot of people that know all three. That's the gap. I'll pause with that one.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, thanks for that answer. Appreciate it. The next I'm gonna truncate a couple of these. Apologize, but I want to make sure we get as many as we can. Joe Manis asked a question. This is really from a, I guess it could be an industry perspective, but certainly from a government perspective. Those of us without an extensive depth of knowledge to ensure the appropriate measures, how do we, let me try again. How do those of us without an extensive depth of knowledge ensure the appropriate measures are included? And how do we include those requirements in bid proposals where such requirements are one of many subcomponents? So the question is,
so
how do you ensure that they're being followed?
yeah, so the easy answer is how do you ensure you're putting enough things in? Is that's the coordination with your system owner and ISSM during the design. You know, you'll submit that CCI list in your design analysis. They should be reviewing it and commenting on it and saying, take that CCI out or put that CCI in or use, right, and do this and do that and help guide you. But just like ATFP years ago, just like sustainability years ago, in a number of years, we got smart designers. And in a number of years, our smart designers are going to get this stuff. And it's not going to be so scary. It's just new right now, just as force protection was, and this, what's the 72-foot standoff distance, and what's all these, you know, it's all new and different, progressive collapse, and all these things. You know, I like to think that cyber, we're going to get good at it. We're not good at it yet, but we got damn smart federal engineers and A&Es that do work for us that are going to get smarter. You know, going to get smarter on this. And as they do, this is going to become more second nature.
Yeah, I would say those of us in industry are certainly looking at hiring and training designers in cybersecurity. It's certainly a focus. So the next question is from Anna. The question is for designers, when we have to do a 250511 spec for a system without clear guidance yet, such as, and she gives an example of fire suppression, what specific information is the government looking for until guidance is available?
So this is the guidance I give my designers in-house. And this is just the reality of authorizations right now. The designers, the guidance I'm giving my designers in-house is that I would like to see a 250511 edited for every control system in the project, right? Now, that's not to say that the government's going to come and get authorizations on every control system. I can't guarantee that they're going to come in and get an authorization on the elevator system. They probably aren't. But there's nothing in my criteria that allows me to not design it in. So my guidance to designers is follow the steps, do your best guess. If folks aren't participating, you're putting in your design analysis and you're screaming to your project managers that folks aren't participating. If the government doesn't step up to the plate, go forth and do your best work, right? I can't make the government show up. And when they do show up, say, thank you for showing up. I appreciate this input, and hopefully it's not too late that impacts a change. But if it does, it does. And so my idea is make all of our buildings, this is my word, not anybody else's, make them all ATO-able or ATO ready. And then if the government is participating along the way, great. If we come back after the fact and try to get an authorization in that control system, there's at least a chance because at least some cyber was considered when it was built. I hope that answers that question there.
All right, thanks, David. Appreciate that. Anna, if you have a follow-up to that, please just type it in. I make a comment here from Ken. Can I crochet? I hope I have that.
Yeah, and that gets to what I was talking about with the FRCS. I'm with you. It is against our FAR rules of specifying to that level of detail. Yeah. But if we have a J&A, regular FAR, it's unlikely, I'm not saying unlikely. In the past, we've not gotten a lot of J&As, right? That just is open competition. But the idea is that the necessity for those J&As with respect to cyber might be a compelling enough case to get them. And if we do, it alleviates the designer of record a lot, because you don't have to design this. I say you don't have to design the system. Our systems won't have technical specs. It'll say, give me make and model with firmware version empty squat on it, and I don't have a technical spec for that equipment anymore, right? So in a sense, it's alleviating some design effort. But again, it's all regular FAR rules, and if there's no J&A, then the question is exactly right. We can't specify make and model, and therefore we can't really finish RMF step 2 until we know the make and model, which is in construction. So that's why that graphic shows step 2 bridging the gap between design, bidding, and construction. Over.
Right. Hey, David, this is Ken. I wanted to elaborate a little bit on the CCIs. We've done about 25, 30 projects with Navy and another 30 sprinkled between Air Force, Army, Marines. And we found the Navy is the farthest along among all the branches on this. But even so, you know, there are issues, blah, blah, blah. But one thing I wanted to point out was we got some really great feedback from the Navy and the Marines on the CCI list. And so we've taken it from the bare bones that you got, you know, in the templates to build them out to address some of the issues we have to get projects moving more simply and more efficiently. One of those was to define where in the network that CCI applies. So for example, if we're saying something as simple as it needs to have passwords, well, there are some devices that can't have that, right, at level 0, level 1, or whatever. So we define where the CCI applies at what level of the network. And then the second thing that we got feedback on that we do in all of our CCI lists is to indicate where in the UFGS specification it is located. So for example, if this CCI applies, where can I validate that when they give me specs, after we agree on the CCIs, when they give me these UFGS specs, where am I going to find that CCI in the spec? So we literally say, okay, you're going to find this at 3.5.4 or whatever. And that's really helped. So I just wanted to mention that for everybody as probably a good practice. I'll shut up now.
So that's exactly right. It's helping the validators. Here's another thing I didn't really talk about. Just as these words are new to us, these CCIs and artifacts, and it's new to us from a word standpoint, design, build, design, bid, build, and the difference between a UFC and a guide spec is foreign to our typical command information office folks. So by putting that paragraph language in, where in the spec that CCI is addressed is extraordinarily beneficial to our validators when they come in to validate, and why in the Navy UFC for design and construction, I added a requirement, and it's in there now. The Navy design and construction UFC elaborates even further on just the general cyber UFC is I'm asking for where in the contract those CCIs are addressed. So in having that, you're even easier complying with my Navy design and construction UFC. Over.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, David. I appreciate that. And Ken, thanks for the follow-up. I think we are just about out of time here, David. There were a couple of questions that we didn't get to, really focused on asking recommendations for kind of how to get a response back from the government, or how to encourage government to participate in you know, getting the CIA impact ratings. Or the second question was, yeah, very similar. How we get past step?
Yeah. Well, from an ISSM perspective, and now I'll speak for the Navy too. Again, the other services, unfortunately, they're different major commands, right? The Corps doesn't have CIO type people that does this. It's called the Army Cyber Command, and they don't have public works within the Corps of Engineers. It's AMC or MCOM, but within NAVFAC, those folks are. And my CIO chain of command, they've established ISSMs at every FEC. So up and down the echelons, there's a name, and I got a whiteboard of everybody's name in the Navy or NAVFAC and who the ISSM is. So from that aspect, I think we at least know who it is. Getting that participation, I'm with you, they're busy folks. Where we've not been as good, admittedly, is the identification of system owners for all these various control systems. It's generally public works, but not always. Sometimes it's CNIC, sometimes it's SPAWAR, NAVAIR, sometimes it's somewhere else. But we've not generally done as good of a job with identification of system owners. And as when you're going through your designs, you know, make your best guess, screen that you're making your best guess. annotated as such in the design analysis and in communication with the project manager. And I know that's nothing new, but that's just what we can do. And when the government decides to show up, if they show up late, great. Thank you for participating. I hope it's not too late to get this in without impacting a change. Over.
Yeah, thanks, David. I appreciate that. Yeah, that's good advice. I hope everybody has copied David's email address. I'm sure he's available to answer further questions if you have further questions after this presentation. We are at 1 o'clock. Let me just do a quick wrap up, and then we'll let everyone get on with the rest of their day. One more slide, please. Mel, there you go. Just a quick comment about JETSI, DoD Industry Government Engagement. We have a panel, DoD Implementation of Resilience Approaches Within a Risk Management Framework. For those of you who are looking for further information and further, kind of information on this, I should say, JETSI is a great place to be. I'll put in a plug. There'll be lots of discussions on this and other pertinent topics at JETSI. There's looks like we have a couple climate related infrastructure presentations, community resilience, of course, once again, some more cyber things to talk about at JETSI, infrastructure security and floods. Overall, I mean, for those of you who have not been, it is a great place to meet other like-minded professionals and folks that are really interested in these topics, and certainly lots of participation from our federal partners at JETSI to help us kind of navigate these issues. Next slide. And in closing, just a comment we do run a Resilience Community of Interest webpage. This is the webpage here. Once again, these slides will be available. We're going to hang them on the FAME website. So you will have all this information, including the backup slides. My email, Joe Manis, who's our COI chair, please email me or Joe if you are interested in becoming a member of the COI, Community of Interest for Resilience. We would love to have you participate. We're always looking for volunteers and for assistance to people with interest and expertise in this topic and other resilience topics, really focused on how to make our infrastructure more resilient to all kinds of events. Cyber just being part of it. So that's it. I think that wraps it up for today. Thank you so much for coming. It looks like we're a couple minutes over. But once again, please email David if you have any further questions. I'm sure he is. And thank you, David, for participating today. This has been fantastic.